Welcome to Leverage Women Podcast, where we equip, inspire, and connect women in the leadership that God has called them to. So welcome to the Leverage Podcast. I'm here today with my friend Kim Savage. Welcome, Kim.
Hello, Krista.
We are so excited to connect. We had planned actually to have lunch at some point, and then COVID-19 happened, and that did not happen because there was no place to lunch. We couldn't even go to the park. So here we are, and so glad to have Kim with us. Kim's a part of our Leverage team, but also has some really incredible leadership lessons to teach us today, because she's been on a leadership journey like none other in the last year as she has become the executive director of Hope International. So Kim, we're going to start our discussion here just by asking you, tell us about Hope International, what they do, what their mission and vision is, and why you're so excited to be a part of that team.
Totally. So Hope International's official mission statement is to extend Christ's compassion to the neglected poor. And I love that phrase. But let me unpack what that means. So when we work with communities, we want to be Jesus' tangible hands and feet. And we work in three major areas. We do clean water systems. We do various economic income generating opportunities, and we do various food security initiatives. And what is the best part about Hope is that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every single person on the planet. So the way we work in those communities is to really have a community-driven, beneficiary-driven decision-making process. They identify their priorities, they set the pace, the tone, the work that we do. And I just love that model. So we're not going in and saying, this is how it's going to be. We turn that on its head and say, what do you need? How can we help? And I love that so much. So that's a bit about what we do.
Well, that's really exciting. I know that in the time that I've known you, as you've unpacked even some of what your heart is for ministry and the leadership that God's called you to, this came about and was such a beautiful fit for you in your life because of your passion for this. So it's really awesome to see how that mission and vision just kind of flows out of you as you talk about what you do. But here we are, and we currently are sitting at mid-April.
Yep.
COVID-19 is abounding around us. And I thought it would be really interesting for you to share with our listeners, what are some of the challenges that you're finding as you're leading your team through this? What does that look like? Like, what does your team look like? And what are you seeing are the most important things that you need to do to help your team through this?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest challenge right now is communicating enough, right? It seems like this bottomless pit of needing to communicate with the team. And, when you take a couple of steps back, you can see why that is. They're scared, right? Like there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. Everybody is working from home and under different models with all of the stress in the background. And so keeping people encouraged, communicating with them enough, helping them to see vision and see the direction of where we're going. All of that can be really challenging when you can't have FaceTime. And Apple FaceTime is not the same as sharing a cup of coffee over a desk or over a table, and that's a really different dynamic. So I would say the communication piece is huge. The other huge piece, which I just touched on a little bit, is that whole sense of helping people stay optimistic and see the vision, because optimism is not the same as positivity. Positivity can be a bit Pollyanna, kind of in the almost ignoring the realities of what's going on. Whereas optimism is actually really direct in terms of, yeah, we know what's going on. I get it. This is a hard time, but actually believing and having hope for a better future and a different future and all of that sort of thing. So really working with the team to help them hold on to optimism, help them hold on to no, we can emerge stronger from this. Like, this is a hard season, but we can move forward from this. So I would say those two pieces are the real big ones right now.
So when you talk about needing to communicate that to your team and
Yeah.
the need for it, are there some tangible ways, like you talk about communication, is it,
Yep.
when you talk about communication being key, is it just communicating that and communicating that and communicating it over again? Is that really one of the key pieces to keeping that optimism high?
Yep. So I'm probably saying every single day, certainly to my team leads, but even to the whole staff team, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. And, one of our priorities, because obviously, we can't be doing a ton of fundraising. We can't be doing a lot of programming. One of the big things that we're doing right now is using this time to do all the internal work that will make us stronger as an organization, right? So that when we come out of COVID-19, there is no long to-do list, and not just the to-do list of catch up, but the real foundational pieces of, changing how we think about fundraising, changing how, we think about programming will make us stronger moving forward. So really working through those pieces and telling them about that and talking about that every single day. And then there's also a couple just mechanics pieces that we've put, or logistic pieces that we've put into place. So we use this little program called Slack, this little app. And every Monday morning, I put on there, just on our general channel, these are the priorities for the week, right? Because we recognize that everybody is working weird hours and all of that sort of thing. Lots of people have kids at home. So, that 9 to 5 is not probably as realistic as it is when you're going into the office. But really keeping people focused on what the priorities for the week are. And then having a time of connection on Thursdays. So we've started doing this Zoom happy hour, and it is supposed to be happy, right? Like in terms of connecting and seeing everybody's face and kibitzing a little bit. Also keeping people on track, sort of talking about what we've been doing for the week. But it is just a time to gather. And normally we wouldn't need to have all staff every single week, but right now we need to do that. So that's what we're doing.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that. We're doing some of the same things with our organization. And I was just chatting with one of my team members today about how that need to be, the need to be reminded about what the mission and vision is so important.
Yes.
In the first couple of weeks of this crisis, as I found myself at home, getting up, getting dressed, getting in the office, there's almost a sense of unheralded urgency, like it was over the top urgent. And I would literally sit at my desk for 8 hours until my back hurt and I had to get a different.
Yeah.
And then that sort of passed. And now there's a little bit of lethargy in there and lack of motivation and discouragement.
Yeah.
Because you do lose sight of the vision, but also your whole work pattern has changed. So the things that I normally would be doing that give me purpose and give me excitement and help me carry on with my day, I don't get to do them.
Yeah.
And so that's a really big deal when it comes to your team, understanding the ebb and flow. And I know for my team, I feel like I've had to continually remind them or give them permission that it's okay that it's not the same.
Yes.
And it's
Absolutely.
okay that you're going to have an ebb and flow in how you feel.
Yeah.
But the struggle comes, Kim, and I don't know if you have anything to add to this or some comments on this. The struggle comes that as a leader, do I get to do that too? Can I have those moments when it's not so great? Can I let my team know that I'm not doing so great? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was struggling with that a couple of weeks ago, and I was reminded of some of the Brene Brown stuff around vulnerability and thinking about what does it mean to be a vulnerable leader and a transparent leader and a servant leader and all of that sort of thing. And I made the decision, rightly or wrongly, I think time will tell if it works or not, but to just not only create space for it's okay to wander around your house and not really know what you're doing or where you're going. Like that's a natural emotion right now. and to actually even be vulnerable enough to say, yeah, I have walked around my kitchen and literally just stared at the garden with not really much going on up there because it's just becomes overwhelming. Because I think when we sort of can say we're going through that process ourselves, it creates this space with our team to go, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only, it's okay that I'm feeling like this. I'm not a quote unquote loser for feeling like that. Like there's some collective sigh of relief that we're all in this together and that we're all navigating those emotions, because we might be similar in this. The one habit I have not stopped is I get up every day, I get dressed, I put my makeup on, not because I'm seeing anybody, but because it creates that rhythm of productivity, which sounds ironic, but just that normalcy of getting up, getting dressed, literally going down into my home office has helped a lot with my mindset of, no, we can do this. I would never purport to crush it every single day, because there has definitely been Lululemon days, but for the most part,
yeah,
trying to get up and get going.
Yeah, I think there's something really, it's what they call a keystone habit. It's a
Yep,
thing
absolutely.
that propels you into other really good habits. And I know I cannot, I've phoned my husband. I'm like, I'm all dressed up with nowhere to go. And here I am in my home office, and I bring my cup of coffee in and lay everything out. And my home office is stellar. It's a couple of Costco tables. So that's probably why the podcast sounds a little bit like it's in an echo chamber, simply because I am literally in a almost empty room except for a couple of tables and some books. I keep piling things in here. It's looking more and more like an office all the time. I keep bringing books in here, but yeah, I think it's important to have those habits. Also important to give yourself permission to adjust. I read a really great article by somebody, a professor at the University of Toronto, about some of the steps that you will go through to figure out how to cope with this. And that one of them was early on in the process to give yourself permission to adjust, and that it's not going to be all great at the very beginning, that you've got to find a new normal pattern for yourself as we walk through this. So that's really interesting to hear. I think it's great that you have given that vulnerability piece to your team and how you've connected with them. And I think it will actually augur well for you and them as you walk through this, because we're leading to teach others how to lead. It can't just be leadership in a vacuum, that I'm a good leader and here we go. It's to lead others on that journey of understanding themselves, understanding how they too can rise up and lead. So
absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I know I talked with you about this a little bit in the last couple of months. This pandemic happened right on the eve of your major fundraiser for the year.
It sure did.
And I was thinking about, what are your thoughts about what do you think is going to be most challenging for all of our nonprofits, our churches? Because, we have a lot of women who are working in church ministry that are part of this, of our Leverage tribe. We have nonprofits. What do you think what are the long-term or even short-term ramifications of this over the next year to 18 months? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, sort of the elephant in the room is, I do think that there is going to be a financial impact. I think there's going to be a financial impact of probably to the tune of 30 to 40% across the board, just about for everybody. I've officially quoted myself now. It's going to live in a podcast now for the rest of the rest of time. But my hunch is that there will be a 30% impact just on the finances. Having said that, I actually think that nonprofits and churches are going to learn how to be more nimble and more agile and make better decisions and think differently and work together with other nonprofits differently than they ever have before. And I think this pandemic, this challenge, is going to force us to work better, but in the very best possible way. Like, I just use the word force, but if you think of it as sort of fire starter, you know, if you think of it as a bit of a kick in the pants, something we wouldn't choose necessarily for ourselves out of the gate, or maybe different organizations were on that spectrum. But I'm thinking of all the incredible conversations I've had with colleague organizations, colleague nonprofits, and that sense that we're all in this together, and the space that it's created to actually work together. Like, I think it's incredible, and I think there will be incredible opportunity moving forward. We're definitely in the season right now of calibrating. Okay, what does this mean? What are we going to do? You know, everybody's in that sort of 0 to 6 months stage right now, but you can already see the foundation of what is to come, which I think is amazing.
Well, it's interesting that you would say that, because even on a micro level of, me,
Yeah.
I'm doing with less. I'm
Yeah.
okay with less. Like,
Yeah.
there's not this flurry of activity to acquire.
Yes.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is that whole idea of scaling back on some of these non-essentials is going to make us stronger. Remember when we did our leverage events we did it in Prince George, and we did
Yeah.
in Langley, we talked about pioneering leadership.
Yeah.
And we talked about that term, pain equaling progress, and how pain leads to our maturity. And I feel like we're seeing it. We're seeing it and so yes, on an individual level, and as you've referred to, on an organizational level, we're going to watch a sense of maturity come in how we handle finances and how we do the ministry that we do. So for instance of that is, I think there's a whole plethora of us leaders figuring out that we can save gas money and food money by having a meeting like we're having right now.
Yeah, right.
Zoom is actually not hard to use, and it simplifies your life. Like, my 2-minute, I would say it's a 30-second commute.
Yeah.
My 30-second commute feels a whole lot better than my 45-minute commute in my car. And I think about the time that I'm saving and the stress level that's gone down in my life, because it's a level of simple I haven't had before. So that's a really good point that you make about what's going to be happening. Kind of piggybacking on that question, want to get your thoughts on what you think is the overarching cultural shift that we're going to see because of this global crisis. What do you think will define this shift? What will be like a defining moment of this shift as we move through this?
Yeah. So so I have 3 ideas on this, but the one that jumps first to me is a sense of gratitude. I don't know about you, but in most of my circles, and it's actually been fascinating to me, because there is some very, very real economics going on here, but that sense of I'm okay, and the actual ability to literally count our blessings, which is, I just think, such a move of the Holy Spirit, and the ability, like, it's just a balm for the soul to be able to take a step back and go, wait a minute, I am okay. And here is all the ways that I'm okay. And here is what I am grateful for. And I hope that we don't lose that. I hope that we don't lose that ability to be grateful for what we have, even in the face of what is less. And I think that is a lesson that I really hope we don't lose, that we hold on to, that withstands this, whatever going back to normal looks like. I really hope that sticks. The second, and related to that, is that ability to live with less, right? I hope that we go back to a little bit more simplicity, or a simplicity in our life, a simplicity of what we care about, what brings us joy, all of those sorts of things. And I mean, I think the third one for me is, I hope this sense of banding together and unity keeps going, right? Like, that sense that we are stronger together than we are as individuals, that we can do more together than we can as individuals. The effect that we have when we all put our shoulder under something. I really hope that we don't lose that. I hope that we don't go back to living our individualistic lives and in our own little bubbles, and kind of not necessarily tapping into not just the effect, but also the affect that we can have on others. So those are the ones. And I've been struck by, on a very spiritual level, how people are really coming back to that conversation of where is God in all of this, and tapping into a spirituality and a conversation about God that wasn't happening in many cases before that. I've been reading lots of articles on, and of course Easter was just last weekend, about how people are really coming back to that root of faith, which I think is really interesting. And I hope that also continues. So I don't know, I gave you 4 there. I know you
No,
only
that's
for
good.
1, but I had 4.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about those things. And again, we see the shift personally, and then we see the shift in our locale, and then globally. And I know for myself, I've been reading through the book of Hosea, and I've been reading Psalms, and just reading a book called We Are What We Love, or You Are What You Love,
Yes.
James Smith, and being struck by worship as a formation of and discipleship, and recognizing that there are things in my life that have been idols or things I've worshiped that have been stripped away. And it's the best. It's freeing. It's like God has given me pause to think about what is really important, and how am I being formed? How do I need to be reformed? And all of that, I think that shift, it's going, because we inherently are spiritual beings, whether we know Christ or not. We are spirit. Every human is formed in the image of Christ. And of course, the ultimate goal of salvation is to be reformed completely into his image, which we will in his presence be completely whole again. That idea that worship leads us to be fully human. And I think that that is something that people are experiencing across the board.
Absolutely.
In connection. My neighbors, we have happy hour on Thursdays. It was happening last night again, and we're social distanced from each other out on the road. And we're like, is this what it took for us just to connect and be together? People are longing for that connection. And it's been incredible to be a part of that shift in our culture. And you're so right, let's not lose it when we go back to normal. And what is normal? We don't even know what that's going to look like. We don't know if normal is going to be a different normal. Possibly. Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, I've got a few more questions I want to fire at you here. Beyond our current situation, Kim, as you're looking at God's leading in your own life, is there a lesson or a season that stands out to you that's prepared you for the challenges that you're currently facing? Is there, in your challenges personally, any challenges personally, or challenges in your leadership at Hope International? What's prepared you for this?
Well, it's funny, when I saw this question as I was preparing for our conversation, and it's just so great to be doing this. What leapt to mind was the season of God's call on my life, which was very much a season of waiting, immediately leading up to my time with Hope International. I was almost in a season that probably spanned 2 years of knowing, knowing that God was moving me on, knowing that it was time to pursue different things, but having to really literally wait on the Lord for his provision, for his right role, for his all of that sort of thing, and a season of exploring different opportunities. And kind of like the cloud with the Israelites, when God says go, you go, when God says wait, you wait. And those 2 years before coming to Hope were very much like that, kind of like stop, go, see this opportunity through to fruition. Nope, that's not the right thing. Keep going, and all of that sort of thing. And then, that perseverance and trust that it takes to walk that journey, because there was a lot of trust in, not everybody would necessarily know this, but the candidating process for Hope International rivaled that of many large churches finding a new lead pastor. Like, it went on for the better part of a year. It was like an 8-month process, and good on them for, doing all of that due diligence and coming out on the other side. It's all good. But the perseverance and the trust that it took, from God saying, the moment I opened that job description for Hope International, and he said, this is your role. This is the one I've prepared for you. And then the trust that it took to see that through for, 7, 8, 9 months of interviews and conversations and dialogues and uncertainty. And in the face of, I'm sure, there were quote unquote better candidates, right? There was probably ones with more experience. There was probably ones with more education. There was probably whatever. But to trust that still small voice of God saying, I have prepared this for you. This will be yours. And then to see the fruit of that, to have the perseverance and trust to walk that out, saying no to things along the way that were kind of distractions, and come out the other side. Fast forward 10 months, right? Like, COVID happened within 10 months of me starting with Hope. And I was reminded over the last sort of month or so that same perseverance and honing and trust that God will find a path for Hope out of this. I need to cling to that, because what I hold incredibly at my core is that God's heart is for the people we serve. God's heart is for the brokenhearted and the struggling overseas who literally have nothing. Like, when we get stressed about what we don't have, or, those sorts of things. I got back from Ethiopia a few weeks ago and literally saw people with nothing, no clean water, imagine dealing with COVID with no clean water. You can't even wash your hands. So navigating all of those pieces and the perseverance of knowing and trusting that the huge God we serve is very much on the side of those that Hope serves. And I just have to be obedient and take some of the good stewardship steps and trust his voice, right? To trust his voice, because even now he is saying some audacious things, which we are walking through, right? I am walking my team through. I might not necessarily be using the line, well, God told me to, but making those decisions very much following the Holy Spirit. So it's going to be an interesting ride. I'm excited to see where it lands.
That's awesome. When I hear you tell a little bit of your story, and of course I had the privilege of being your friend, walk through this with you, and been so excited for you. But I go all the way back to that moment when I really got to know you, and it was at a Leverage event.
Oh,
and we prayed together.
Yeah.
We were in a place of going, God, what do you want from me? I want to serve you. And you were and it was a beautiful brokenness that we shared together. I remember it was a prayer meeting in the basement of the church, and we saw the Holy Spirit just
crying right now.
on us there. And God placed you and me beside each other at a table, and we prayed together. And it really was the beginning of our friendship and our co-ministry together with Leverage.
Absolutely.
And we have watched God do some amazing things. And I think I wanted to ask you that question simply to let our listeners be reminded of their own journey and what has God done in each one of our lives to prepare us for the next step in that journey. And he's so faithful to give us what we need so that we have the wisdom moving forward in what it is that he's called us to do. He never leaves us without the tools that we need in our toolkit. to do the
Absolutely.
job that he's called us to do. But I look back, Kim, and I remember that moment with you as we prayed, and you know, we were crying,
Yeah.
it was a snot cry, like it was
Yeah.
bad. I remember that big crocodile tears,
It's
and
a big cry.
we needed Kleenex.
Yes.
And I think so much of our journey as leaders, the preparation comes in the surrender, in
Yeah.
going, God, I am willing. You can use me. Please use me. I just show me, show me, show me. And then, yeah, that perseverance of going, I know what God's called me to do, and I will not deviate from the path. That old song, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. We
Totally.
think about that idea as a leader and how important that is. And so, yeah, here you are. Here you are,
Yeah.
and God has called you to. It's pretty awesome. So, kind of, I want to back the truck up a little bit as we get ready to come to the end of this podcast in a bit here. But I want to kind of step back from Hope International, COVID. All of those things, and ask you to maybe unpack for us a little bit of your journey, in the sense that when did you first come to understand that God had gifted you with leadership skills?
Well, if you were to ask my little brother, who's a year younger than me, he would say about 5 years old, when he used to say I was always bossing him around. And even from an early age, I remember him and I were very close. And I remember I was often the spokesperson for the two of us with our parents. Like, he'd give me like the little elbow, like, you do the talking, you do it. And so, I mean, that was those are some of my very first memories of what it meant to be a leader. But then fast forward, maybe 15, 20 years, 25 years. And, you just sort of see things bubble up, right? Like you see the things of, you're the one to raise your hand for, really probably something you had no business raising your hand to say that you would do. And, by some miracle, people trust you to do it, and it comes, and it has a good outcome. I'm reminded of how, in sort of some of the early days of my career and of my ministry, being put in situations where I felt like I was the inexperienced one, or the young one in the crowd, but still somehow these amazing things were happening, and somehow people sort of cared about what I thought or what I was talking about. And so I always found that a really interesting dynamic in the early years. And I always thought what was really interesting is there have been a few really pivotal women in my life that I've done life with for decades, that created space for me to try and succeed, but actually, almost more importantly, to try and fail, right? And then help me kind of unpack what happened when it didn't work out. And I just think it's such an incredible journey to have those women in your life, or even people in your life, because I've had some pretty amazing male bosses or male supervisors that have really spurred me on, right? That have really created space to root for me and say, you can do this, and even if it doesn't quite work out, we're gonna dust you off, and we're gonna put you back on track. And I think that's been really, really incredible.
So, as you're expressing this and talking about this, and I'm sure you've got pictures of people in your mind.
Yeah.
And you've got names that you could just go, this person and this person, this person.
Yeah.
I think for our listeners, the reason I ask you the question is I want each one of us, again, to ask ourselves that question, because it's powerful to go back and remember who impacted you, who pushed you, who gave you room to fail forward, who helped pick you up, assess, and carry on, who, even when you were, when it was a rip-roaring disaster, still believed in you. And I think it's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it keeps us humble. I mean, you realize you get there on your own. And the second thing is, it really reminds you of how important it is that you turn around and do that for somebody else and speak those words of encouragement. Just go, I believe in you. I think that you've got leadership skills. You are blowing my mind. I can't wait to see what God's going to do with you. Those kinds of statements are so powerful as we look at this next generation of leaders. And it's kind of scary, isn't it, to think that we're talking about the next generation of leaders coming after.
Yeah.
What happened? We were the young ones. Like then what happened? I'm not really sure what happened. I remember a woman coming up to me in my church and going, Krista, I just really think that we need to be mentoring the younger women in our church. And I literally looked behind me because I thought, she can't be talking to me. I am the young one in the church. Somehow I had graduated to this new level. And it is so important to look back, remember who helped us, and turn around and do that for somebody else in our life.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
As we look at this whole thing of leadership and the people who inspired us, is there a watershed moment in your life that stirred you to want more of Jesus in your life? Like, it's one thing to be, there's all kinds of effective leaders in our world, but to be a leader with Jesus at the helm, like what happened in your life that you went, Jesus, you're it for me? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So I actually don't know if we've ever really talked about this, because it's not always a season. Like, I love talking about when Jesus really became Lord of my life. I don't always love talking about how it happened. So we may have not talked about this, but when I was in my very early 20s, I got married real fast and I got divorced real fast. So, I got married at 20 and I was divorced by the time I was 22.
Wow.
And so it was a disaster. I was shown that, but what came out of that season was this incredible recognition that there was a huge difference between Jesus as Savior and Jesus as Lord. And the watershed moment in all of that was some truly incredible friends that I have to this day and that are still really dear in my life and precious, that loved me enough to hold me accountable, to hold up the mirror, to sort of talk about what wasn't really working, but also loved me enough to really help me walk through all the shame and the grief and the sin and the yuck, right? Loved me enough and created space for me to keep falling forward. But they kept spurring me on. And I remember those couple of years post divorce as some of the most transformational of my whole entire life, because you could see, like, I could look back on that season and see Jesus doing these incredible things in my life. It's when I met my husband. It's when, it was the start of all of that, but it was also the start of this deep abiding and understanding that Jesus never lets us go, that no matter how much we screw up, he never lets us go. And that there is really this whole life after a big epic fail. And when I think about leadership, I think about, I literally got picked up, dusted off, and told, no, you are more than this. You are more than this mistake. And I will be faithful. I will be faithful to see through the plans I have for you. And to, be 25 years after that and to see the faithfulness of God, it is incredible.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, Kim. And I'm sure for people who are listening, so many of us share epic fails in little years of our lives, and it's what you do with them. And as I listen to your story, I'm hearing you take what God did in your life and using it to you're not living in shame, you're living in redemption, and you're living in grace, and you're living in a place where you recognize that happened to me so that I would totally humble myself before my God and understand my total dependence on him.
Totally.
And why is it that more often than not, we never go to Disneyland and come back having had a watershed moment about our lives.
Right? I
Never.
know.
It's
Never.
always in the muck and the grime and the pain and the hurt of life that God grows us up. And it's just such a reminder to me as to why he had to die on a cross for our sin. He had to die. Something had to die. There needed to be pain and bloodshed in order for forgiveness and redemption to be fully known. And the layers of our salvation, the layers of the crucifixion, the layers of atonement that we see in the life of Jesus and in our own lives helps us understand what we're called to. And it's nothing shy of a miracle that we're chatting today, about all of this and where God's sent you on the journey, what he's called you to do. And it's also a complete miracle that we get to do this, because without his redemption, we would have no hope. We would live in failure and in shame. And have nothing. And it really is such a reminder that that's what life is all about. That's why that question is such an important question for each of us to ask. And so I even say to our listeners today, ask yourself the question, do I know and can I articulate that watershed moment in my life with Jesus? And oftentimes it's not always our salvation moment, but it's a moment of coming back to the cross, coming back to what we know is true and right in our lives after having strayed away from it. And so I listened to your story, and parts of it mimic my own story. I understand how that is, but how those moments actually define us like nothing else in our lives and prepare us for more. I have a good friend who's a psychiatrist, and I love talking to her because she's always got such great insight on things. And this particular juncture in time, as we're chatting about everything that's going on, she, the healthy mindset, she said, is to first think about surviving, and second, think about what you're going to eat, and third, think about how you're going to care for and love the people in your life. That's how simple it needs to be. And when you peel everything back, even on a spiritual level, to that, how am I going to survive? Well, on a spiritual level, I'm going to survive by diving into the Word of God, committing to prayer and worship in my life. That's the very first thing that I'm going to do. And so that's kind of where this conversation has led us. And I really thank you for opening up and sharing that with us. I think it's so important for other women leaders to understand that none of us, we might look like we have it all together on the outside, and it may look all good and pretty and great, but there is grit and mud and dirt that we have slogged through and then grabbed onto God's grace in tangible ways. And that is what has propelled us forward. It actually helps us to love people and to grace and care for people and patience with people, all the things that a leader needs to have in order to lead well. And I'll tell you, when I was 20, I thought I had it all together. I knew everything. There was not a thing for me because I'd figured it all out. And then God in his mercy comes along and turns your whole world upside down, and you land with your face on the sidewalk, and you're bruised and you're beaten up. And it's then God picks you up and you have a whole new perspective on life. And it's incredible, actually, what he will do in those moments of our lives. Well, we're going to close this up in a little bit here. This has been a great conversation. I think we're going to, I'm going to end with this one question. What habits of great leadership do you think need to be practiced by the next generation of our leaders? So my question really is framed in, if you had 200, let's say you had 200 young leaders in a room, men and women, what would you say to them?
So I think there's two things that I would say. I would say, how's your humble quotient right now? Like, do you think that you're the smartest person in the room? Do you think you're the one that's got the best ideas? Do you think that you've got all the answers? Or do you actually think you're not the smartest person in the room, and that there's lots of other people in that room that can offer something. So I would say check your humility. Where is that at? Because in my experience, the mark of a great leader is that you surround yourself with people who have different experiences than you, quote unquote, know more than you, are smarter than you, whatever language you want to use around that. But one of the things I would say, check your humility. Where are you at with that? And be honest about where you're at, because it's okay if in this slice of time you think you know it all, you're the smartest and all that kind of stuff. Just know that you won't be able to stay there for very long, because it's a facade and it's not going to last, and it won't propel you forward. The other thing that I would say is, what are you committed to, and what are you willing to really slog it out for? What are you dedicated to? And because it's in those moments of dedication, and dedication doesn't mean hanging in there for 6 months. Dedication means hanging in there for 6 years or 16 years or 60 years or whatever. But what are you really committed to and dedicated to? And hold fast to that, and make sure whatever you're leading, that you are truly dedicated to. Because otherwise, again, it's sort of this facade where it sounds right, and it might even look right, but at the root of it, there's not what you need to really sustain it and keep it going. I think those are the two big ones I would really talk about.
Wow, those are great wise words. And it's understanding your values, right? Understanding your value. And then, we are called to the long game in our walk with God. And I think we do struggle with being just distracted by so many of the pulls of this world, and even the message of this world, where if I don't feel it, I got to let go of it. But there needs to be that connection between what I feel and what I know. And sometimes what I know out of the Word of God that propels me to change my feelings. It's that old Crucial Conversations thing where you can act your way into a feeling,
right,
before you can feel your way into an action. And I think that's really, really, really wise words. So Kim, I want to thank you for being with us. I want to finish off our podcast by just giving you an opportunity to let people know, if people have heard a little bit about Hope International today, and they go, hey, that's an organization I would like to know more about. That's an organization that maybe I could support. Maybe I can help build a well. Maybe I can help bring medicine. How do they connect with you in order to understand more about what you do?
Totally. So they could Google me on LinkedIn, and they can send me a message that way, or I'd love to have normally I would say I'd love to have a coffee with them, but at this particular juncture, I'd love to have a Zoom call with them. They can Google my name on LinkedIn. They can also go to our website, hope-international.com, and there's tons of information about what we're doing and what we're all about. Probably said far more eloquently than I did at the beginning of this call. But I love connecting with people. That's what gives me energy. And if people want to know more, I'd just love to connect with them. So those are probably the two best ways.
Awesome. Well, we just want to thank you again for being here with us. We love having you on our Leverage team. We look forward to more connection with you. And to our listeners, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of our tribe. And we hope to connect more with you. If you have ideas about what you think we should be talking about on our podcast, please reach out to me at Krista@febpacific.ca. Or again, you can just Facebook me, Google me. If something will come up, you can get in touch with us. But again, thank you for being here today with us, Kim, and we look forward to doing this again.
Thanks, Krista.